Welcome back to the Anxious Avoidant Bridging the Gap video series. This episode is around communication and how you can communicate effectively with your partner if you have a different attachment style. It's something that I use with my clients when they try to repair their relationship, something that I also use at home with my wife. The idea is to really give you the right tools in order to connect, not only at a deeper level, but also in a practical way to diffuse any tension, to really feel connected with your spouse. And as usual, you have in the description the link to get the workbook that you can use to learn from this video series. Let's see each other after the jingle. I can predict your breakup in 3 minutes. When I say I, it's actually Gottman, who has this study, this kind of love lab, and he claims that he can assess 96% of the time whether a relationship will work out or not on conflict. And how, what's interesting is how the first few minutes of the conflict, because the way you approach a conflict, especially if you don't change the pattern, will create this sort of deterioration of relationship. This is how you create, you develop resentment for your partner. And the thing is, as you know, anxious avoidant fight might escalate very fast because, again, we are two different types. We see the world from two different extreme point of view. So first thing to understand is the way you start is also the way you end a conflict. And so in that sense, conflict is usually not the issue. It's not about the dishwasher. It's not about the mother-in-law. The problem is usually the tone. The tone of how you speak with your partner. And I find very interesting, fascinating actually, that we allow ourselves to speak in a certain way with the most important person in our life, and we would never ever speak to our colleague, to strangers this way. But we allow ourselves to say nasty things, to lash out. And it's because of intimacy, and I think it's interesting because it's contradictory. If you think about it, the most important person in your life, your partner, you should treat them in the same way you treat a stranger. So it's very interesting, and it's very, you have to recognize this because it's going to damage the relationship long term. This is why you need to use soft startups. It's basically shifting from you never care, you never listen. When you start the conversation, when you blame the other, what happens? People will protect themselves, okay? Especially with avoidance, they'll say, okay, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to be judged. I don't want to feel this way. The right way. And again, the content, it could be about the dishwasher, it could be about the mother-in-law, but it's how you approach things. The soft way is I feel unheard when. And then by doing that, you connect at an emotional level. You don't attack, you connect at an emotional level. When you do that, you don't have this fight or flight response from your partner. When you do that, you don't have the spike in cortisol. You don't have this element of defensiveness. You don't have this element of, I need to defend myself. I don't agree with you, and I'm going to prove that I'm right. And when you have this I'm right on both sides, nothing is winning. So what happens is really be strategic, and it's not natural. So that's the problem, is that you have to learn it. Those small world shift will deliver a massive outcome. When you start nicely, trust me, your arguments, your fights will finish with the right outcome, with the desired outcome. My view as a therapist is that anytime you have an argument with your spouse, it's actually the best way to feel more connected. Because as you overcome this hurdle, if you overcome this hurdle, but usually you do, the result is that your relationship is stronger than before. If you don't feel like this, it's because the dynamic the discussion was really about defensiveness. I defend my point. I don't want to see your point of view. I don't want to be empathetic. I call that pragmatic empathy, of actively trying to understand your partner's world, trying to understand your world and why you're being triggered. So it's very important to understand, just by working on those soft startup, you will make a massive difference in how you communicate your needs, how you communicate the disagreement and things you're not necessarily in line with your partner. And then you have this very famous technique amongst relationship therapists, is the traffic light technique. You speak, you listen, you don't interrupt, right? My view, and it's interesting because as soon as you do it, try to listen more than you speak, right? And when you speak, you wait for the other one to be done with what they have to say. Very often we hear something we don't like and we jump at it. No, let them explain, let them feel heard. The prep study around this idea of when you feel heard, when you feel he or she's listening, you feel loved. It's as simple as that. The other way around, if you feel that whenever you speak, you're met with attack, defensiveness, you feel unloved. If you do that over time, if you do that for the next 10 years, guess what? You're going to be drifting apart, resentful, and not feeling connected anymore. When you take that time, when you slow down the process, when you listen, you help as well your emotional processing of things. When you have an anxious attachment style, it's important to be heard. I've mentioned that about anxious attachment style, but it's true as well for avoidant. We have a hard time opening up. And the thing is, I've seen personally, but also with my clients, there's always this element of, yeah, it's easy for you. You're anxious, so it's easy for you to express things. But for me, it's hard. It requires more effort, and therefore I need more space in order for me to express what I need, to express the things that I disagree with, because you can be avoidant and people pleaser. That's my case. And again, it's turning those elements of conflict into connection, because you feel heard, because you don't feel attacked, because you're emotionally stable along the way, and simply feel connected. So that's very important to have this. So you have the soft opener, the soft startup, and then speak, listen, be respectful. Again, the same way you wouldn't interrupt a client, right? You will listen to what they have to say, even though they're complaining, for example. You will listen. You will listen, you will wait for them to stop, and then explain your point of view or try to understand their point of view. Then another very simple technique that you can use whenever there's a heated argument, it's a 20-minute timeout. You won't be able to solve anything if you're full of emotion, if you're lashing out, if you're yelling, etc., etc. You need some time apart, 20, 60 minutes, and return to your partner to discuss, but more at peace, more like settled and calm. The problem is, when you're anxious, you don't do the timeout. You want to solve things right away, right now. Right now, I need an answer. And you use this emotional response as a fuel to get into the conversation. The problem is that avoidant, what they do the timeout forever. They never ever come back to the discussion. And so I used to do like this. I used to do this like a lot with my wife, where we would have an argument. I would say, okay, I listen, but then I would never come back to it. Never resolve anything. So the point is like understanding it. You need that time apart, but you also need to reconnect. And there's an element of like, okay, we're not going to solve this right now. Let's do one thing. Let me go for a run. Let me cook, whatever. And then this evening, tomorrow morning, we'll discuss about that. You regulate first and you repair later. Okay? So if you're anxious, regulate first. If you're avoidant, repair later. So you need those two elements should you want to actually feel connected after you have an argument. So these sentences are kind of cheat codes. If you don't know exactly how to repair, how to feel connected, and you can use them. I will put them in the workbook that you can download again for free. That thing about that came out wrong. Can I try again? We're on the same team. This is hard, but I care. You can make yours, but it's important to find those words explaining that you understand. You're using pragmatic empathy, right? You're trying to repair. We're in the same team. It's hard, we disagree, we're going through difficult times, but we're a team. And again, you will never be in a perfect relationship. You will never be with the perfect partner. So the right relationship, the right partner is the one who can recover. The right relationship is the one where the couple is able to recover, to repair. And so you can use those phrases whenever in the middle of a fight, of an argument, whenever you want to reconnect. It's like really diffusing the thing. Again, we are doing the opposite of being defensive or attacking. We are trying to, zoom out. We're together. We're in love. We have a family. We are together. This instance doesn't represent what I feel, how I feel about you. Okay, we're on the same team, right? It's hard, but if I zoom out, I care. And so sometimes we define the relationship based on those little elements, the little points of disagreement that are actually meaningless. They become important if you don't treat them, and if you still attach this element of defensiveness to it. Then when it comes to communication with anxious avoidant, we have different ways of communicating. When you have an avoidant attachment style like myself, you don't necessarily like talking for hours on the phone or sending text whenever you travel or whatever. It's about setting up rules, right? What do I need? What do I expect from you? As soon as you have rules and it's clear, there's no, the expectations are set. So if, for instance, you're dating someone avoidant, and it's important for you that they text you whenever they travel, just let them. The mistake that people make is that they assume this is what people do, and I expect you to do this. If they don't feel like doing it, they won't. But if you tell them clearly, this is the rule, this is what I expect. And if you love me, if you respect me, you just need to understand that's what I need. Then they will send that message. It's a very simple example, but very often I see that we make assumptions about what's right based on what we need. But if we don't express clearly and we don't set out the rules, then of course things are in the air and we feel resentful and frustrated because they never met our needs that, by the way, they were never expressed in the first place. So again, if you're anxious, it's also about finding the right space, understanding that you don't necessarily need the validation, because you will also help them, show them that they can commit, that you can count on them, etc., etc. So I think the texting treaty is also very important, almost as on a day-to-day, as like very pragmatic way of managing the relationship. And so nonviolent communication, I could do a 3 hours video on this. I will put a lot of content on the workbook. This concept has been developed by Marshall Rosenberg. And I love this quote: words are windows or walls. So that's your choice, to use them to connect or to push people back. So the point of non-violent communication is to observe. So that's why you need to be super aware of how you function and using that pragmatic empathy. Your feelings, and then you express the need and you request something. Very often we do the other way around. We request, right? I ask you to, or you never do this. The point is to bypass the blame, bypass the triggers, bypass the shutdowns. And it's teaching your partner, it's also teaching yourself how to be clear, how to be respectful. It's one way I mentioned emotional fluency. It's something you can teach if you're dating an avoidant, because they're not usually very good at the emotional language. When you start speaking like this, and it's not natural, so that's why you have to learn it. you'll see how different their reaction, how stable and how great you feel because you're not playing games anymore, right? You're not walking on eggshells. You just feel heard. You just feel that on their end, they understand, they take things into account, and they finally make that step towards you. So that works with text, that works with talks, conversation, conflict. This is how you can connect. So these are all the tools that you could use if you are dating someone who has a different attachment than yours. Again, I didn't want to put too much on the slide deck. Have a look in the workbook if you want some tools and sort of prompts or things you can use on a day-to-day basis. And I'll see you next time for the next episode. Take care.